Hi, everybody. My name is Abel Pacheco. I'm the Seattle City Council member for District 4, and I am here participating in a Facebook Live event with Annie and Melia, one is from Seattle and one is also from Minnesota. So I want to introduce them, or give them a moment to introduce themselves.
All right, wonderful. Hi, I'm Melia. I grew up in the Seattle area, went to college in Los Angeles and came back about 3-4 years ago. I was really involved in the community in Los Angeles where I went to school and really wanted that feeling of community when I came back to Seattle. So really made an effort to get involved in different programs and different organizations that really focused on that community involvement. One of them being the Emerging Leaders Program with United Way. For work, I work at Deloitte. I'm a consultant for their alliances group, and yeah.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Annie. I actually work at United Way of King County. I'm a fundraiser, and I moved here from Minnesota just under 2 years ago. So I am still pretty new and learning a lot as I go along. I'm also an emerging leader with United Way, and I'm excited to talk about the Seattle Freeze.
Yeah, and I originally moved to Seattle 9 years ago from Los Angeles, and got involved early on with United Way's Emerging Leaders Program. And so I've learned really quickly that home isn't about location, home's about people, and United Way has helped build that sense of community for me. And so with both the volunteer projects, the engagement, and just some of the network opportunities that have been available as a result. So with that said, we're going to kind of go into some of our questions about the Seattle Freeze. Just thinking about how we can break the notion that in Seattle, it's so hard to make friends. Mm-hmm. Did you have friends when you first moved to Seattle?
I did growing up here, so there were a lot of people that I came back to. But when I think about my friends now, there are so many people that I met in the past 2-3 years, either through work or through United Way or other organizations that I'm a part of, that have become such an important part of my life that I didn't have when I lived here before school.
And did you have any just strategies for making new friends outside of just engagement? Or
for me, it was, and there was definitely a period of a few months coming back where I was getting readjusted, wasn't really sure what my place was in the community. And my strategy was kind of doing things and going to events or getting involved in programs that actually really interested in me, not with the goal of meeting people, but knowing that if I met no one that I really hit it off with, that it was still something that interested in me and was exciting. And through that, I met a lot of really like-minded people that I was able to connect with right away. I think United Way is a really great example of that, and a lot of other organizations that I'm in, is that if you meet someone there, you know you have at least one thing in common with them. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, I have a very different experience. You know, I'm moving here less than 2 years ago. I think my ultimate goal was to build my network. And
Mm-hmm.
So I moved here knowing 2 people, and I was related to both of them. So I feel like my strategy was mostly to say yes to everything, even
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't necessarily have an interest in it,
Mm-hmm.
with the goal of meeting people. And so one thing that I did was I had an old coworker who moved here on the same time I did, and she invited me to a United Way event, and I didn't know what United Way of King County was. I knew I was showing up to a large event, and that was exciting because there was a chance to meet a lot of new people. And this was Night of Caring,
Mm-hmm.
which is celebrating Day of Caring, which is our day of about 14,000 volunteers in Washington that go out and volunteer. And I had heard a myth that, you know, where are all the Seattleites after 5 p.m.? And so I kind of went into this thinking like, oh, I wonder if there'll be people here. And there was 2,000 young professionals out, and it was like 7 p.m. And I was like, this is where they are. So I kind of used that as my strategy to get to know people. And then it deepened my relationship with my community as well, which was great.
It's wonderful.
So when I first started going to networking events with United Way, actually I met my current roommate.
Oh, wonderful.
United Way's, one of the networking events with United Way. I would intentionally try to have 1 or 2 conversations, meaningful conversations with people. Sometimes I think people have a strategy of networking and trying to meet as many people as possible. Rather, I wanted to build a meaningful relationship or connection with a friend or make a friend. And so that helped me kind of break the freeze myself.
I am someone, we had a presentation at work and the presenter referred to this networking strategy as the Save 3 strategy. Is that every networking event you find 3 people that look a little awkward or a little like they're not talking to anyone, and you go save them. So you go save 3 people from that experience.
Yeah. Well, are there other strategies that you might have employed in terms of to make meaningful connections with folks? Or tips that you heard that might have been that might be helpful for us?
I genuinely believe that most people are open to friendships. I think this term, and I'm not even sure where it came from, that Seattle freeze makes it seem like people in Seattle aren't open to that. I've met a lot of people just from chance encounters, or if maybe I'm at an event that I've very intentionally gone to, or I'm just at a restaurant and I'm waiting in line and I strike up a conversation with someone. I think most people, if you put yourself out there, will want to talk to you and get to know you in that way. But I do know a lot of people that won't do that first step of being the first one to put themselves out there. So it's just being okay with being the one that puts in the effort and puts themselves out there in that way.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I actually thought about that too. So coming from the Midwest, in a lot of random situations, you will get talked to. I feel like that's sort of our stereotype, is the Midwest nice. And you'll be standing in line and someone will talk to you and you'll make a friend. You'll, go to a bar in Minnesota and you're going to get talked to. Someone will reach out. But I think that spoiled me when I first moved here, because I had to become that person and I had been used to other people doing that just naturally. And so I feel like that might be where the freeze comes from, at least in the Midwest perspective, is you're used to everyone being that person, not necessarily taking that upon yourself. So I see the Seattle freeze as a challenge for me to be more out there.
And I think part of it has to do with, I actually think a little bit has to, the Seattle freeze is a little bit seasonal, because during the summer, everybody's engaging, social, like sun's out, shades out, everybody's having fun. So, and I find myself that during the winter, you have, even myself included, have to be very proactive about trying to engage, or, hey, how's it going? Or what's your story? Or,
it's so easy in the winter, because I know, at least for me, when I get off of work, it is dark, and it is dark when I go to work, and it is dark when I come back from work. So I have to be very proactive and really put in an effort to say, okay, I'm going to make plans with someone. I'm going to go to this event, or I'm going to do this.
So what's your reaction to hearing that making new friends is only very or extremely important to 27% of Washington residents?
It makes me a little sad. And I also don't necessarily, I'm not sure where this fact came from, but I don't necessarily believe that it is that low. At least in friends that I've made in the last few years, it's people come to Seattle and they want to meet people. I think this term Seattle freeze that we throw around is very intimidating, but I think that if you take that term out of it, there's a lot of people and a lot of different organizations and smaller communities that people can get involved in, and that would be very welcoming and accepting.
Yeah, and I think whether or not, like, I take that with a grain of salt, 27% of people want to make friends here. I think ultimately it's a little stressful for me and concerning, because I think if that is true and you don't open up your friend circle, you don't try and meet new people or let new people in, you end up becoming a little bit more closed-minded. And I think the beauty of going to a large event and talking to people is getting diverse perspectives that you wouldn't normally have in your own circle. And I think that that's something that's really special about going to networking events or going to volunteer events, is you get to meet people that necessarily don't come from your same walk of life. And I feel like that's really what allows us to grow as people, is to get exposed to new perspectives.
And I think, sorry to interrupt, I think that that's a really good point, because a lot of people that other people interact with might have gone to the same school and had the same education or work in the same industry as them. So it's really great to go to these events, and using emerging leaders as an example of people from all different backgrounds and all different professions.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're all looking for a little bit of just meaningful friendships and those connections at different points. And sometimes obviously is when it gets to be in the winter and it's cold, dark out, those connections become much more important. But the other thing I've come to realize is just sometimes how small the world is.
Yes.
I've been in different places and run into friends with people that I've met through different networking events. And they're like, Abel. I'm like, oh, you know, and you see somebody, you're like, oh, the world's a lot smaller place than you think sometimes. So just thinking about this, keeping with the topic of the Seattle Freeze. So do you think it's made up? I mean, it sounds like we've all kind of had an opportunity to make some meaningful connections through different events, but also just either being transplanted to Seattle. It seems like Seattle is getting a little bit of a bad rap.
I don't want to say made up necessarily, because people come and they have their own experiences, and some people might not have been able to make friends. But I do think kind of two things. I think it's what you want it to be. I think if you decide, I don't accept the Seattle Freeze and I'm going to put myself out there, I'm going to go to events, I'm going to make an effort, I think you are going to be successful. And then on the other hand, I think using an example of someone who's just moved to Seattle and knows no one, it's very intimidating to think about creating this entire new community and starting over, but it's really, you truly just need to meet a handful of people for your circle to grow. And they'll introduce you to people that you might hit it off with, or take you to events, or introduce you to different programs. So I think it's less thinking about, I'm starting over, I need to create this entire new community, versus I just need to meet just a few people that have things in common with me that are really going to open up my world.
Totally. I read this quote as I was sort of brushing up on the Seattle Freeze, and it was something about, it's a little harsh, but it says Seattleites will love to tell you about their outdoor adventures, but they'll never invite you.
Absolutely.
And they'll never invite you, but they'll love to tell you about them. And, you know, I thought about that, and I thought of it as a challenge. I was like, well, maybe I should have my own outdoor adventures and invite them and,
Absolutely.
and be that person. So I feel like whether or not the freeze exists, I think we have control over whether it affects our lives individually.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I see it on an individual basis as well.
Yeah, definitely being proactive in terms of trying to start those initiatives or events and saying, hey, we're going to have some friends over for a barbecue or for a run outside of Green Lake. It sounds like it's a good way to kind of get people out. Mm-hmm. So I want to check to see if we have any questions through either social media or
just how emerging leaders like 365, like what type of events you've done with those that have actually helped grow your network.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, for me, actually, for Emerging Leaders 365, I'm a member myself, and I feel like the volunteer events really help me. I think volunteer is a great point of entry to get to meet new people. You're engaging in an activity that inherently means you care. And for Emerging Leaders 365, we have a lot of great volunteer opportunities on second Saturdays and a lot of special volunteer events that come up for the program. So I feel like that's a great way to get your foot in the door and to meet some new people. And that's helped me as well, just to experience other nonprofits and to experience, you know, actual physical rolling up your sleeves in the community. It's a great way to meet people that want to do that too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the volunteering events are great because you're doing an activity together. It's really easy to have a conversation with someone if you're doing something in that moment. As I became more involved in United Way and in the Emerging Leaders program, and then in Emerging Leaders 365, which I'm a member of myself, I went to a lot more of the networking events, which are at some really, really cool locations that I would not go to on my own. There was one in the middle of Nordstrom recently, which was really cool. And then also the Amazon Spheres, which I had never been to. So it's a really cool way to experience something that you might not have before, which I think is a great way to bond with people. If there's always something to talk about, we're never just talking to talk. We're talking about our environment or the amazing food or other things that we've experienced. So it's a really great way for me, at least, to meet people. And I know a lot of people have had the same experience. And coming back to Seattle, I mean, I joined a lot of different organizations, but United Way was kind of the main one that became my organization and what I wanted to do every week. And it's great because it's also what you want it to be. You can volunteer or show up as little or as often as you want, which I think is great for a lot of people because we all have different schedules.
Yeah, and I mean, like as I said, with my roommate, I work different industries, but we have very similar values, and sometimes it's making those friendships that align with your values as well. Actually, it's funny that you're saying the story about people wanting to do outdoor activities and then taking initiative. A friend who I met through a volunteer event and invited me for a brunch after the volunteer event.
Oh, great.
We reconnected with a hike a
awesome.
couple weeks ago. So Yeah, it's definitely very true in terms of that. So just thinking about volunteer activities that you might have been participated already, and are there favorites that you're just like, I look forward to this time of year, or in the spring, the fall, where there's a lot of young people just kind of getting engaged, and other folks who are really committed about the community that you'll be there at, or you think are really good volunteer activities for folks to get involved with?
I think that United Way has such a variety of events that truly anything and any type of organization you want to be involved in, they definitely have some sort of partnership. For me, I've honestly enjoyed every volunteer event that I've been a part of. Some of the ones that come to mind, I really enjoy going to Fair Start. It's always a really great experience, and it's great to kind of roll up your sleeves and really be hands-on. And then doing something as important as Mary's Place, whether that's interacting with people that are there, or just helping sort the different donations that they have. I very recently did a project with Birthday Dreams, which I thought was really special. I hadn't heard of the group before, but they help put on birthday parties for kids that are currently in shelters or other transitional housing, which is always everyone had a really good time, and it went to a really good cause. So there's a lot of really great organizations that United Way has introduced me to that I don't think I would have ever experienced without that.
Yeah.
And
it looks like we have a question up on the screen here, so I'll leave it to you if you want to.
Okay, so we do have a question. Should we be using board or service opportunities to make friends? What if the group just wants to get down to business and not learn about each other?
Yeah, I think not necessarily just using board or service opportunities to make friends, but having them in the entire slew of how you meet people. So I think we talked about hiking, affinity groups that are outside of necessarily community work. So having a nice balance, I feel like, is what helps me meet people that have a diverse perspective. So for example, you can join cycling clubs, which is something I've been looking to do. Unfortunately, I sat down and I looked at my hobbies, reading, cooking, exercising, and I was like, these are all things I like to do alone. And I want to preserve that, I want to preserve that as an outlet. But I think that for other people, choosing a different avenue is totally fine, and having a well-balanced slew of opportunities.
And I will say, I think boards are a really great way to grow your network and meet new people. With boards, since in every board, there's a certain level of responsibility that comes with that. People might not be as open to doing things beyond the board because they know that there's a certain level of responsibility and a certain level of officialness, for lack of a better word, that goes into that. I'm on several boards, and I've had some where I've met friends and some that's truly just we are essentially coworkers working together. Ideally, it could be a combination of both, but I know that's not everyone's experience, and I really do think that it depends on the organization that you are on the board of. But that all being said, I do recommend getting involved in a board because it's a really great way to learn not just about an organization and everything that goes into it, but also about yourself and what's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, I try to, following Annie's point, try to be proactive about trying to create those opportunities after a board meeting and try and say, hey, anybody free to grab a drink afterwards, either chit chat about the day or the whatever we heard in the board meeting, and maybe it's another way to continue the conversation offline. So I guess I just want to see if there's any other thoughts. Seattle Freeze does exist. I've experienced it myself. Sorry, I'm reading a comment. I've been here for over 20 years and still see it every day. I do love Seattle. Oh, good. And my husband and I have raised our family here, and we have our own network of friends. What I'm hearing when I read a comment like that is just thinking about, again, folks find it hard for that follow-up engagement of, hey, we may have a really good conversation. And sometimes it's being proactive of getting someone to potentially just follow up. Are there any other tips or that you want to share just in terms that would be helpful for other people that maybe we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I can take one too. I read this somewhere, and it was about persistence. And I feel like there's a level of patience and persistence I didn't have when I moved here that, you know, you could make a friend in a month in Minneapolis, but here maybe it takes 3 months, maybe it takes 6 months. And that's not something that you should take personally, I feel like. I think maybe everyone's different and, you know, regionally maybe people are different, but knowing that it's not because they don't want to be friends with you or they don't like you, it just is going to take a little bit longer. So sort of adjusting your scale of persistence and friendliness in that way is something that's helped me.
Yeah, and going off of persistence and what you were mentioning earlier, be the person that plans things. If you feel that you're not being invited to events or that you're not, you know, meeting people, plan something that you would really like to do and then invite people to it. At the very least, you're doing something that's really interesting to you. I also do something kind of strange, which is if I want to be sure that I'm keeping in touch with someone, I'll put some sort of symbol or emoji next to their name in my phone so that when I scroll down, if I see an emoji and it's been a while, I'll just send a message and say, hey, what are you up to? Let's go get coffee, or let's go to this event. Come to this United Way event that I'm going to. So that's just a little trick I have
That's
I like
genius.
to do.
That's genius.
And it helps me keep in touch with people that might, you know, fall at the bottom of my inbox.
Yeah, I've heard from people, you know, they've used Bumble BFF to make friends. You know, usually at some point in the conversation when I meet somebody, they ask them where they're from. They're not from here initially. It's like, oh, what's your story? How'd you get here? And usually you're going to find something within their story and their experiences that you can, through that thread, make a connection. And hopefully that's a way to at least continue the conversation as it goes from there.
Absolutely.
So all that to say, thank you for attending our Facebook Live event and helping us discuss through the Seattle Freeze.